This is the video for the Chapter 2 quiz review homework. So number 1 asks you to fill out this table and basically categorize each of these numbers. So for natural numbers are positive and 0 integers. So that would just be, in this case, 11. 1 over 11 is not an integer. Square root of 11 is not an integer, not a natural number, and negative 11 is negative, it's not positive. Integers are numbers that are not fractions, so that would be positive 11 and negative 11. Rational numbers are numbers that can be written as fractions, so that would be 11. 11 is the same thing as 11 over 1. 1 over 11 is a fraction, so that is a rational number. Square root of 11 is not rational because only the square root of perfect squares are rational. And then negative 11 is the same thing as negative 11 over 1, so that is irrational. And then real numbers, all of these are real numbers because none of them are complex or imaginary. None of them have I in them. So number 2 gives you values for R, capital R, lowercase r, and wants you to find A such that A is equal to pi times capital R squared minus little r squared. First, they want you to estimate the values of capital R, little r, and pi to one significant figure. So originally, capital R has 4 significant figures, and so does lowercase r. And then pi has technically an infinite number because it never ends. So estimating capital R to one significant figure means we need around 19.29 up to 20. So that has one significant figure because trailing zeros are not significant. Same with the 10, so we round the 11.01 down to 10 because that will be one significant figure. And then pi is 3.14159, so on and so forth. And so we round that to a 3. That would be one significant figure. So then part B wants us to estimate the value of A with these estimations of capital R, lowercase r, and pi. So we plug those in for pi, capital R, and lowercase r. Plug this in your calculator and you end up with 900. Part C wants you to find the actual value of A using really pi and then 19.29 and 11.01. So just use pi on your calculator. Don't estimate it to 3.14 or anything. Actually use the pi button on your calculator. You end up with 788.1753313, but they want you to give your answer to 3 significant figures, so 788. And then part D wants you to find the percent error. So percent error is estimated value minus the actual value divided by the actual value times 100%. So if you do this, you end up with 14.2%. Number 3 gives you the value x equals 0.1265, and first part A, they want you to write that in standard form or scientific notation. So you need this 1 out in front here, so 1.265 times 10 to the negative 1 because we moved the decimal over to the right 1. Part B wants us to estimate the value to 2 significant figures, so that would be 0.13. And then part C wants us to find the percent error again, so the estimated minus the actual all divided by the actual times 100. And so you end up with 2.77%. Number 4 asks you to solve 2 pairs of simultaneous equations. So for part A, I used elimination method. I multiplied the top equation by a negative 4, and you end up with negative 4x minus a equals negative 12. So now when I add the 2 equations together, the x's get eliminated. You end up with negative 5y equals negative 10. Divide both sides by a negative 5, so y is equal to a positive 2. I plugged that into the top equation. You could have also plugged it into the bottom equation. It doesn't matter. So you get x plus 2 times y, and which in this case is 2, equals 3. So that's x plus 4 equals 3. Subtract 4 from both sides, and you end up with x equals negative 1. So your final answer is negative 1, 2. For part B, you could have also done something similar, but because these numbers aren't the prettiest numbers, I decided to use my graphing calculator instead. So I solved both equations for y. So this top equation becomes y equals negative 3 over 7x plus 20 over 7. And the second equation becomes y equals 11 over 8x plus 5 over 8. I plugged those into the y equals part of my graphing calculator and found where they intersected, which is 1.24 and 2.33. If you don't remember, you need to set each one equal to y, and then go to y equals on your graphing calculator. Under y1, put one of your equations. I would put parentheses around the fractions. Under y2, again, parentheses under the fractions, enter the second equation. And then graph it. Make sure you can see the intersection point on your screen, otherwise you might have to change your window. Then you go to second trace, which is calc, and number 5 is the intersection point. Using your left and right hand arrow keys, you find the intersection point, have your cursor be over the intersection point, and then hit enter 3 times. Alright, number 5 is solving quadratic. So part A is already conveniently factored for you. If it wasn't factored, that would always be your first step. So factor it. Set one side equal to 0, factor it. In this case, we're already there. So then this is zero product property. You have two things multiplied together, set equal to 0. So you can split them up and set each one equal to 0. Again, this only works if this is equal to 0. So split them up, you get 7x minus 2 is equal to 0. Add 2, divide by 7, you get x is equal to 2 over 7. Or 3x minus 1 equals 0, so add 1, divide by 3, you get x is equal to 1/3. Part B does not factor, so you have two options. One, you could either use quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where 1 is a, negative 3 is b, and negative 9 is c. Or you could have used the 0 function on your graphing calculator. So again, you go into y equals. Under y1, you type in x squared minus 3x minus 9. Hit graph. Make sure you can see your zeros on the screen, otherwise you might need to change your window. And then you go to second trace, and this time we want to go to 0. So then you use your left and right hand arrow keys until you're to the left of one of the zeros. You have to do 1 0 at a time. So move until you're to the left of one of the zeros. Hit enter. Your calculator will say left bound. Then it will say right bound, so you move your right arrow key until you're to the right of it. Hit enter, and then it'll say guess. You hit enter one more time, and that will give you one of the zeros. Then you have to repeat steps 3 and 4 for your second 0. Either way, you end up with x is equal to negative 1.85 or 4.85. So number 6 is giving us a situation for simultaneous equations. So they give us two situations that Igor bought 4 bracelets and 3 pendants for 5,529 Indian rupees. That says rupees, but it should be rupees. Arishka bought 2 bracelets and 5 pendants for 6,751 Indian rupees. Part A wants us to write 2 equations using that information. So I let B be the price of bracelets. Obviously, it's not going to be US dollars, it's going to be Indian rupees. And P is the price of pendants. So then part A, you have 4B plus 3P is equal to 5,529. That's from Igor's purchase. And then from Arishka's purchase, you're going to have 2B plus 5P equals 6,751. So then part B wants us to solve this. You could either do substitution, you could use your graphing calculator. I just did elimination. I multiplied Arishka's equation by 2, negative 2. So I left Igor's equation the same, and then got negative 4B minus 10P equals negative 13,502 for Arishka's equation. Added them together, that eliminates the bracelets. You're left with negative 7P equals negative 7,973. Divide both by 7, and you end up that the pendants cost 1,139 Indian rupees. I took that and I plugged that into the top equation. You could have also plugged it into the bottom equation. It doesn't matter. So 4B plus 3P, which is 1,139, is equal to 5,529. So then I subtracted 3,417 from both sides and divided both sides by 4, so you end up with each bracelet costs 528 Indian rupees. Alright, so number 7 is talking about quadratics. We saw something similar to this in the notes. So part A asks you to find the value of C. So they tell you that the y-intercept is negative 2. You could just remember that C is the y-intercept. Or if you plug in 0 for x, you know that y is going to equal negative 2. This would all go away to 0. This would all go away to 0. So then C is equal to negative 2. Part B wants you to use the coordinates of the vertex or otherwise to write down 2 equations. So if you use the vertex, they tell you that the y-coordinate of the vertex is negative 5 and the x-coordinate is negative 1. So you end up with negative 5 equals A, negative 1 quantity squared plus B times negative 1 minus 2. which if you simplify this, add 2 to both sides, and then simplify this, you end up with negative 3 equals a minus b. In class, we talked about using symmetry, so they give you the y-intercept point of 0, negative 2, which means the point negative 2 must also be on the graph. So I use that. You plug in negative 2 for y, negative 2 for x, and you end up with negative 2 is equal to a times negative 2 squared plus b times negative 2 minus 2. So if you add 2 to both sides and simplify this, you end up with 0 is equal to 4a minus 2b. Another option is using the fact that the x-coordinate of the vertex is equal to negative b over 2a. You might remember that from Math 2. So you could say, okay, the x-coordinate of the vertex is negative 1, which is equal to negative b over 2a. So this would be another option for an equation that you could use. Any of these, 2 of any of these 3 would work. So I kept it to these first 2 because that's what we did in the notes. I used elimination method. I multiplied the top equation by a negative 2, so you end up with 6 is equal to negative 2a plus 2b. I left the second equation the same, so when I added them together, I eliminated the b's. So add them together, you get 6 is equal to 2a, so that means that a is equal to a 3. I plug that into the top equation. You end up with negative 3 is equal to 3 minus b. Subtract 3 from both sides, and then divide by negative 1. B is equal to 6. You could have just written it this way because all it asked was to find the values of a and b. Or you could have written it as an equation, y is equal to 3x squared plus 6x minus 2 if it ever asked you for it that way. So this has been the review assignment for the Chapter 2 quiz. If you can do these pretty well, then you should have a pretty good idea of what the quiz is going to look like.